Collective, thank you. You can bring the lights up just a little bit more. Collective, tonight is a night that we decided to get together as not just a regular night, but we wanted to put together what we've been thinking through as our podcast and our podcast team. Go ahead, yes, woo woo. I want to give you guys a few little, just a little context before we get started. A couple months ago, we began to think through some things and think about, first it started out of how can we keep reaching young adults and people that are in college, and how do we keep trying to figure out those things. And one of the things that came up was a podcast. And as we begin to think about this idea of podcasts, some of the people that's up here and some of the people that may be in the audience as well, we begin to think about an idea of not just a podcast, and I know you may hear this before, of not just any other podcast, but we just start to think to ourselves, what is it that is on our heart? What is it that we feel is missing in this conversation as young adults, as young people trying to figure this faith thing out? And some of the things that we came across as we start to think about what it means to bring people along in the journey of our own lives. I don't know if you grew up in church or not, but I grew up in a church and a little bit old school sometimes. And there's this word called testimony, right? You tell a testimony. And it's this more moment in the service or in a person's small group or whatever the case may be. And they start telling a story, or they start telling about how they've seen God work in their life. The interesting thing about a testimony traditionally is that there's always this joyous moment at the end. There's always it comes full circle. There's always a tide in the bow, and it was struggling. This was happening. Life was getting crazy. And then this started happening and things turned around. That's usually how it goes. But how many of you know, I don't know about you, but we've been in this walk as young people for some time now. We recognize that that's not always the case. That it's not always the story where it's a joyous moment towards the end. And we start thinking about our journey. We start thinking about 2020, and I don't have to recap 2020. You guys lived through it. You guys know some of the things that took place. And then we start our new year, and we start to think about, all right, our podcast and our podcast topics and thinking about these things. And then we start seeing some more craziness, and we start seeing some more things culturally that's coming out and things that's happening in our world. And it's not a place to be political, but I think one of the things that we start to really move in as we start the podcast was we start to recognize, when do we speak up? When do we use our voice? And one of the things that we saw, and one of the things that you'll see, that's a preview of one of our podcasts that we just filmed, is that as we begin to think about this, and one of the things that really struck a chord, is we started seeing all the things in the Capitol, and you guys know all the story, all the different things. It's not here to talk about that. One of the things that made us stand up, though, and feel like we had to lean in was one of the things as it relates to a person that had a flag that said Jesus. And just as a person who is a representative and a person who calls himself a Christian, for some reason, just as Kelsey said, we're seeing things right now take place in culture and people that are calling themselves leaders, and we don't like what we see. There's something that where we are and where we see that's taking place, and there's a disconnect. And sometimes we allow that disconnect to let us walk away. We allow that disconnect to make us move away from who God is. But tonight, as we talk about this podcast and as we get into maybe some light things, maybe some deep things, I just want to give you guys some room and some space to recognize this is a moment where we are walking through life unanswered. It's not a joyous moment at the end. This is our stories. This is our moments where we're vulnerable. And we decided, why wait to the very end to start speaking up and start saying something? When we see something, we want to say something in that moment. And so tonight, we're going to be talking about what that looks like as it relates to struggles. As we turn the page into 2021, we recognize that we may have some goals, some things I want to get better. I'm the traditional person. Yes, I went and got a gym membership, because that's me. They get money off of people like me, okay? It's a new page. It's a new year. You can laugh in church. It's a new page. It's a new year. It's a moment for us to think about, how do I get better? How do I do something different? And I think what unifies us is not only a moment to how do I better myself, how do I get better, all these different things, but the struggles that come with getting better. And tonight we want to lean into that idea of struggles and what that means for us as young people, because I think that is something else that unifies us, and we want to be open about that. So I got some of my podcast team up here with me, and I decided that I wanted to make sure that we came up all together. I didn't want to just be up here speaking by myself. I wanted to actually bring them up with you. So I'm going to introduce them all, and then at the very end, you guys are going to clap for them, okay, at the very end. So we got my beautiful wife, Aisha. We have Justice, and we have Christian that's with us. There we go. Okay, so I want to get into a topic tonight, but before I do, I want you guys to know who these people are. Maybe you knew, maybe you don't. So I want you to describe yourself in one word or a phrase. The way I want to phrase this, maybe you watched the podcast if you haven't. What are you bringing to tonight? What is the vibe that you're bringing tonight? What's a phrase or a word that you can think of, okay? I'm going to kick it off. I got to be honest. Turning 30 this year, I don't know your ages, but I'm feeling old, okay? So I'm going to call myself, the vibe that I'm bringing is the young uncle that's trying to be hip. That's the vibe that I'm bringing,
that's a
okay?
Win.
I'm
that's
like the young uncle that's like, you my uncle, but you still trying to be cool. You know what I mean? Like, that's the vibe that I'm going to bring tonight.
A few conspiracy theories here and there. But
exactly. So, as you can see, that's what I'm bringing tonight. That's the phrase or the word, so to speak. I had somebody tell me that I'm trying to be preachers in sneakers. You know, I'm trying. You know what I mean? This is what it looks like. So, who else do we have up here? Come on, somebody jump in.
I'll just jump. There we go. I mean, yeah, in podcast one, I described myself as like the poet, and I thought that sounded so pretentious.
If you don't know Christian,
I just went with
the deep thought guy right here.
Yeah. But I think another word would just be like analogy guy.
Okay.
Or phrase. I just like analogies for things. And just painting pictures. So yeah.
Jump in there.
If I were to revisit episode 1, 2, I'd be the opportunist. But I think what I was really trying to say during that time was I was more of like the questioner. So I'm always like the person that's like, okay, but like, why do you think that? Or like, where does that come from? Where does that stem from? So I always try to like dig a little bit deeper with whatever we're talking about.
Like the surgeon.
Yeah, so sometimes a little bit too far. And,
okay.
Really back in, but.
All right, so Maurice said he is like uncle vibes, and that does not automatically make me auntie. No, I refuse that.
It does not like that.
I would say for me, I'm bringing fierce, faith-filled, big sister vibes.
Okay.
That's what I'm on tonight.
You see, she just put a whole bunch of adjectives in there.
You said phrase.
Yeah, I like it. You have played Minute to Win It before. That is a whole lot of adjectives. I like it. Okay, so check this out. We are thinking through tonight around the idea of struggles and things like that. So we sat down and we started talking about this new year and some of the things. And of course, goals, I feel like sometimes is a little dated and we, can get into some of that. But I don't know who it was that brought it up at the table, but we came up with the term preferred reality. And I want you guys to dig into that a little bit of what we meant by that when we said that and why is that important for us to bring up right now?
Well, yeah, it was you who actually coined the term. So give you the credit.
Wow.
I forgot.
Wow.
Little flex, it's all good. No, but I think what we were talking about primarily was this idea that like when we set goals at the beginning of a year, we always start at point A and we want to get to point B. And during that journey, what is that causing? That's causing struggle, that's causing stress, anxiety. Like, what does that do to us? How does that keep us healthy, right? Yeah. And how can we have a healthy relationship with those journeys? But I think the term goal was a little bit too nuanced, right?
Cliche, yeah.
Huh?
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, and so, because not everybody has a goal, because you can be, waiting in line at a gas station and prefer to not be doing that. And so what does that mean to like, how do you deal with the situation that you are in that reality that you are waiting, that kind of deal.
And one of the things that I thought about when we start thinking about this is where we want to be. And there's always a disconnect of, I don't know about you, but I'm not there quick enough. I'm not there right now, and I feel like I should be further. If anybody felt like that before, this is an interactive audience, live audience right here, okay? So I feel like I'm not there, and I feel like something's holding me back. I feel like I'm not where I should be, and all of these things start coming up. One of the things I want to mention before I move to the next question is we also, pull out your phones for me, we have a text number. If you have any questions, we want your questions. We have a good friend of ours, Garrett the Carrot is our nickname for him, in the back. He's going to be receiving all of your questions. That's a text number that you can text throughout the entire service. So you can think about it throughout the service. If you're a person who's thinking to yourself, my question takes too long to text, so I'm not going to do it, and you want to just voice that, then we'll have a mic and we'll come to you if you have a question for us. Like I said, we're just young people trying to figure it out, so we don't have all the answers. But make sure you engage with us that's here on the audience, here on the text thread, all right? So when we start talking about this preferred reality, we start talking about what it looks like to turn the page and what that means for us. One of the things that we start also leaning into was how do we change from having a preferred reality, aka a goal, to pursuing it? What does that mean to actually pursue it? Because we can get stuck. We can get stuck of feeling like I'm not there quick enough, and social media doesn't help that, right? We start seeing people further along. We start feeling like I don't have enough, I'm not making enough. How do we move from a place of just being stuck to pursuing what that looks like?
Right. Yeah, I think what comes to mind is just because we didn't want to talk about goals specifically. We were thinking we got to talk about how those goals kind of affect our identity. Because I think so much of our identity is rooted in whether or not we achieve the goals we set in front of us, you know, and these mile markers, these checkpoints we want to get to. And a lot of those come from other people and even our faith or whatever it is. And I think the challenge is the fact that we are often in a place where we're riddled with old memories of goals or dreams we never got to, and some that we did. And I think that defines us. And I just think that, I just want to say now that what we identified was struggle really is just that in-between space of that current reality and that preferred reality. And I think my initial reaction is just like reflection, honestly, is just look back into where you've been, and the dreams you maybe had and pursued and let go of, or the dreams that kind of just fell away or whatever. And I think that's a good place to start sometimes and just go, okay, maybe I can reassess what are the resources I have now that can maybe be used to tackle that dream or that goal.
Now tell me this, if you think about a moment in time in your life where, and briefly, can think about where you wanted to be, goal, preferred reality, and how that impacted your identity, how that impacted where you were and started internalizing about yourself. I see some smirks, I see some laughing. Well, what comes to mind as it relates to a moment where you felt this is impacting how I feel about me and who I am?
The reason why I'm smirking is because it's
you're
the
looking at my
classic
eyes, Justice. You're looking through.
big choice, like one of the biggest choices of my life was my PhD route. So like during that time where I was trying to like idealize what I wanted my future to look like, who I wanted it to be seen as, and kind of like, I was kind of thinking like externally, like not actually looking at myself within what was happening inside of my heart, mind, and like, am I doing this for the right reasons, X, Y, Z? But I was looking more so like, okay, I can get the doctor after my name, and so it comes with respect, or like whatever you want to call it, which, you know, that's a different conversation. But that particular thing for me was something where I was like sitting there deep in like, you know, am I doing this for the right reasons? Do I actually want this? Like, is this the actual reality that I wanted it to be? Is it even showing up the way that I expected it to? Yeah. So kind of like what Christian was saying is like reflecting back on, you know, am I actually achieving the thing that I thought I was getting it for? Or, you know, were my reasons even correct in the first place?
Yeah. I have a person on stage who I met 7 years ago. 7 years ago.
Who's that?
7 years ago. And when I met her, she started to articulate her preferred reality to me, that she always wanted to live in Los Angeles. She didn't want to be married. She did not want kids until later in life. And a few more things that was on that list where I was like, wow.
So you
why are we on this
story?
date again?
You gonna tell my
So
story?
I want my
Practice.
wife to lean into this idea as well as what you thought, and even how, babe, I think, I'm sorry for even just taking all these things out, like, but I'm thinking about your own story, but even how that made you feel like you were going in reverse. And let us know.
Man, I was getting ready to say
but you can live into that.
Okay.
Tell us your story.
So
you thought a man was going to take you in reverse. So I was like, all right, what am I doing here? No, I just can't. Go ahead.
Wow. So like Maurice was saying, when I met him, I was living in Los Angeles. I just graduated, was acting, was doing some stuff with Disney and auditioning, and on a really good track. And then I meet this guy, and I feel like, God, what are you doing? Because things are starting to change. Long story short, we end up moving to Colorado when I just got an agent who was really amazing, getting me out for like Grey's Anatomy, which at the time I didn't even watch, didn't even know how much of a big deal it was. Yeah. And then the thing that I was pursuing the most.
She actually dropped you as a client.
Yeah, she dropped me. And y'all, I am Queen Ugly Cry. I am the Kim K meme. And it hurt so much because the thing that was on my vision board, the thing that I had been working towards, the thing that I had been putting money, honey, living in LA, acting classes, headshots, all that, it is expensive. Yeah. And to come out here and to have it, how many years I've been pursuing it since I was 18, to have it just kind of taken away in an instant, really crushed me. And in that, I learned that although I may have a preferred reality, I may make it into a vision board, a collage, I may pray over it, I may speak it out loud. That does not always line up with God's plan for my life. And that was a hard pill for me to swallow because I'm very much a control freak.
Yeah. Now, I think there's an idea for us as well when it comes to, and I like how, honestly, Kelsey started to perfectly speak in a way, in my opinion, when it came to wandering, right? And I think that for some of us, or maybe she said wandering. Maybe wandering. I think for us, as I live into the thought for me, when it comes to, it feels like we can wander. I feels like I'm not going anywhere. It feels like I'm on a cycle where I'm not getting anywhere. I'm more of like a talk back to me. Anybody else ever been in that space? Feels like you're not getting anywhere? You're going in circles? Just me. Got it. So we're going in circles as like it feels like we're wandering. What have you guys ever been in a place where not only were you wandering, but because you weren't getting somewhere, that actually impacted your faith, right? So I'm wanting to get to a certain place. Maybe I got a vision board, maybe some things I prayed over, and actually things are lining up so much that it actually is causing me to, when it comes to my relationship with God, like it's starting to impact some of those things. Because I think when we start talking about faith, and we start talking about this idea of following after Jesus and things like that, let's be honest, sometimes we come with some motives. We come with some things that we want to come into this relationship with. For you, has there ever been a time or something where you thought to yourself, man, this God thing or Jesus thing, it feels like I could have done this without a relationship with God, right? Like I feel like, how is this helping? Or how is this like not, going on in my own life, right? Can somebody tell me something that may have impacted you? Ish, you looking at me, maybe?
I can feel like I can go back to acting, but I want to give one of the fellas some time to speak into that.
I mean, honestly, one of the most recent and probably the biggest challenges I faced, struggles, was my senior year of college. I went into it kind of with this mindset of, what have I been doing? Like, I just feel like the past 3 years have been almost a waste, or just like that the stories I wanted to build in my college experience just never came. And that I was missing something, and that I should have done something more. I just started shooting myself, and just really got to this place of, God, why would this be my story that you're writing? Like, this is not even worth living. Like, I'm bored. I feel like I don't have the community I want. And I was transitioning into a time of, finding new community and new friends that, and still kind of building relationships with people I had been with. But it's just this place of not knowing why I got to this point. And I reached a point where I just literally wrote down I think it was 10, I just opened my journal and wrote down 10 expectant prayers for my senior year. And I just kind of materialized my hopes to see, like, be able to look back at the end of senior year and just say, I hope these things are true, and I'm just going to entrust the Lord with it. But at that point, I didn't. I just was so afraid of the unknown of, why am I here? And if I stay on this track, will I really find what I'm looking for?
When you talk about wondering, I got my degree in business law, was contemplating law school to please my family, but I knew that was not what I wanted to do and not what God had for me. And then to not be using my degree that I paid a lot of money for, to be so invested into acting and to not be in the best location to really pursue that. To come out here, being in that wandering place, not having a job, not using my degree, not knowing what I'm doing, and feeling like, God, in church they always talk about the blessing of God and, all the stuff that God's going to do. And I'm like, he's taken away from me. There's sacrifice. So I had a little attitude with God. I didn't communicate as much for a season because I was hurt at the things at my preferred reality was no longer possible, really.
Wow. I think as I hear your story, some of the things that you mentioned as it relates to how some of those things can start, how it can start impacting our prayer life, how it can start impacting how we view God, how we approach church, how we even come in to a worship setting, all of those things we're coming in with, and they impact how we are posturing ourselves with God and how we even receive some of the things that we think that he's saying. All of those things are impacted. And I think one of the biggest things that we can never gloss over, right, is this truth, big elephant in the room as it relates to social media. And in many ways, blessings. In many ways, people monetize. In many ways, TikTok is very fun, and I'll spend many times hours on it, right? But at the same time, there's something that we are catching on to as society, as scientists are starting to lean into. People that have experts in this field are starting to see the shadow side, the downside of some of the things that it brings to us. And as young adults, I just think that that's something that we have to really think about. I found a video from another ministry that I wanted to show you guys because I think it really opens up and put language to some of the things that some of us may be feeling. And then I want to dissect that right after the video.
I'd like to know
lights.
maybe some honest dark sides of where you find your heart with social media and technology. So maybe Catherine, we'll start with you.
I feel like one big problem that I have with social media is maybe I'll go in and look at someone's pictures and see like pre-existing things and like, ooh, I don't like that person, I don't like what I see, and maybe have this judgment of them before I've even met them. And so when I meet them, I'm like, I already don't like you because you have this, and this.
When people make an assumption about you based off of your Instagram page or your Facebook or your Twitter, you want to present the best. And so finding the right filter and the right caption to put and make sure you have the right hashtags and make sure it's witty, that people laugh at whatever you post, or make sure you have so many likes. I think that's kind of where I struggle in making sure that I present the best.
And so how does that impact you spiritually in a negative way?
For me, it's kind of the question of who am I following on Instagram? And when I'm scrolling and I see these maybe like gorgeous women that I want to look like or I want to be like, I have to ask myself, am I following them for the right reasons because I'm envious of them or because that's what I want? And it takes me away from my relationship and my intimacy with Jesus.
Who would say that comparing with other people on social media brings out kind of negative emotions for you? Yeah.
I think comparison is a terrible game to play because there's no winner, and I think that it can just bring out the worst insecurities. I think also that it brings out the worst in me. My self-image just shrinks, and I begin to lose sight of my self-worth found in Christ, and eventually it goes down continuously, and I'm eventually just on myself all the time for how terrible I look or how I'm not Christ-worthy or Christ-like enough, and how I don't have enough friends, followers, likes.
And so I looked back actually at all my selfies I'd taken, which is extremely embarrassing in the first place. And I looked back at the selfies and I started seeing a recurring theme. That there were selfies of me outdoors or like hunting or like gym type thing. And I saw myself trying to reaffirm my identity as a man. And I was doing that through posting something.
It's a direct science for a lot of us our age. You know, you spend the time, you know, preparing the picture, setting the perfect scene, you know, creating the perfect, you know, hashtag, and, you know, when you spend so much time doing that and you don't get the response that you want or you expect it to get, it's kind of, it hurts you and you feel like, you know, what am I doing wrong? What do people not like about me?
I have noticed that sometimes I'll post something that is maybe like inspirational, if there's just a quote with words, and I do not get the same amount of likes that I do when I post another picture of me doing something maybe really cool in my opinion or the opinion of other people. So I think that also adds to it. So if I'm not getting the same amount of likes as I would if I'm doing something cool, then why would I ever post something that is maybe a scripture or something that is truly food for the heart? But now I'm just giving food to the eyes, and that's where I get my affirmation.
Wow, that's a whole mouthful. If anything resonated with you, can you give me a snap? Come on, audience, don't leave me hanging. There we go. I think some of the things that I've really thought about, and don't forget the text number, Gary, you could throw that up if you want to text any questions to us. But immediate thoughts, some of the things that you think of when you hear the video when it comes to comparison, and what are some of the things that comes up? Babe, you look like you're about to say something.
Dang, look at him knowing his wife. That's what I'm talking about.
Go ahead, take the stage.
Before we just get on a serious note, I just want us to be honest really quick. And how many of you have posted a picture on Instagram you thought was fly, you thought was going to get a lot of likes, And it
Be
did
real,
it. And
be
you deleted
real.
it. I did. Where them hands at? Okay, okay. Half the people telling the truth. Just want to get that out there.
Right. But when it comes to that, right, comparison, when it comes to the things that we're talking about of likes, when it comes to posting a scripture and it's not getting nothing, it's like, why would I post a scripture if people are not going to like that, right? So all these different things come up for us as young people who are trying to follow Christ. What immediately hits you when you watch that video?
The part that hit me the most was probably when he asked the question, like, what does it bring up spiritually when, you know, you want to post a picture or like kind of create this perfect lifestyle or something like that. And what kind of hit me was like this idea of when we try to have a preferred reality from, say, social media or just like other people with a certain lifestyle. I think for me, I often have to ask myself, like, God, like, why don't I have the life or the background or anything that just fits that? Like, why don't I have what it takes to be in that reality? Which, I mean, in times it can be frustrating, but it also, in some other times, it's just like, you know what? Like, I need to learn how to receive this actual reality. Because some things you can change, but some things you can't. Right. And so, lots of the times I think, you know, yeah, you do kind of get envious or you do want to be perfectionistic, which I'm definitely a perfectionist. And
Me
I
too.
love photography. Control freak was definitely, yeah, it's not a great thing. But
No, it's not.
But at the same time, you know, sometimes I think, and this is what I'm learning right now especially, is like trying to let God do what he's doing. Like, let God actually cook. Like, let's say he's preparing this meal for you, right? We don't need to be in the kitchen. We don't need to tell him, you know, hey, I want this, I want that, I want that. He knows what we want. He knows our hearts. He knows what we're hungry for.
Yeah, exactly.
He knows what's going to be nutritious to us.
So tell me this,
right?
if we're talking about struggles, if we're talking about things that we wrestle with, and sometimes it's things that's easy, right? Sometimes it's things that we're talking about things like social media, we're talking about things possibly like relationships. But the honest truth is there's things that we struggle with that are deeper than that. When it comes to addictions, when it comes to just lust or soul ties, if you want to go into a church language or church lingo, right? These things that we actually are struggling with that take us into more of a darker space. My question for us, or some of you, or even if you want to ask a question through text, is going to be how can I possibly hold that struggle that I'm struggling with, try to live for God, and try to get to my future? Like, how am I supposed to be taking all these things into account? I got this thing that I feel like is holding me back, but I like it, right? If we wouldn't like it, it's not a struggle if we don't like it, right? Like, we're struggling, it's like there's something that's pulling me in that direction, whether it's temptation, whether it's addiction, whatever that may be. There's something about that thing that's pulling me in that direction. There's this God thing that's pulling me in its direction, and I'm also trying to think about my future, of where I'm going to be going in life. Like, how are all these things as a young person? What am I doing with all this? Like, how do I handle all these different things pulling me in all these directions? Do they all line up? Is it taking me somewhere? Yeah. How does this work? How does this?
I mean, my initial reaction is there's a first step before even all that happens. Like,
okay.
You figured out. Like,
yeah, let us know that.
I think we have to make sure we're operating in reality in the first place. Like, what I think of when I see this video is something my young life leader brain like latches onto, is just the idea of living in a virtual reality almost, where we're living in a reality that is not even our own. Well, where we can have our current reality, which is ours, and a preferred reality, which is ours.
Unpack that.
But when we go into a virtual reality, it's like putting on a VR headset, and you're operating in a space that you've created, a physical space, but your mind is in a completely different zone. And there's no way you can actually get in your reality any direction you want to go if you're operating in this space that is completely other than your actual reality.
So before I even get into any of those things, this pulling me in this direction, this addiction pulling me this, all of that stuff, there's something and there's power in actually naming where I'm at,
call it out.
True reality, like calling out what is the real reality, like what is
whatever it is,
whatever
it is,
and examples of that. What would be examples of like, this is where I am, like this is it, like how does a person put language to it? Because I think that's important. One of the things that's been very powerful for me as I even talk to some counselors and things like that, moving in my own journey, is when they're able to put language to things. And that's why I really love therapy and things like that, is because they look at my life as I articulate all this stuff, and they're naming what it is that I may be facing. So what would that example of naming my reality, like naming some of those things, just to be practical, like what does that mean? What does that look like?
On a practical level, I kind of want to go back a little bit to the video on comparison, because as I was watching that, I was thinking, a few years ago, I would say I don't really struggle with comparison, but for me, it's not like I'm scrolling and seeing something and saying, oh, I wish I had this. It's all internalized in my mind, and I think the same thing with our struggles and the tensions and the things that we're carrying. Sometimes we don't voice it. We don't voice it to God. We're not honest with ourselves where we are. I struggle with perfection. I'm paralyzed by fear in this moment. That's why I'm not writing the book. That's why I'm not applying to that internship out of state. So it's naming it, and I think also there's power in accountability, in sharing that with someone to come alongside you and just know you're not alone, and just helping take the shame off of it. Take the shame off of it when you name it.
I want to pause on that just for a little bit, because we don't go around voicing the dark side of our life.
No.
We don't go around voicing the things that bring us to downfall. And I remember some of the things in my own life that started to take place when I named something, and it felt so weird that I moved physically out of the space that I said that in. It was went to another room. And I think it showed me something within me that I don't want to face something that I'm going through. And I think some of the things, when we're honest with ourselves, to be able to actually say that. That's why I like the video when she said, I'm envious of this other woman. And sometimes we can just put language to it of, I'm insecure. And let me own this idea of, I lack confidence. So let me go ahead and put language and recognize I struggle with whatever it is, right? So some of those things I think is really, really important, because we don't do that naturally. No one naturally wants to articulate things that they're not good at, right?
Yeah, I have a story actually. Last week, there was something that I was just wrestling with, and because of my personality, I just wanted to keep it, between me and God. And even the fact that I want to keep it between me and God was a struggle, because before I would just do it on my own. And then I was praying, and nothing was changing. And then he put someone on my mind. He put up my sister-in-law, and I was like, oh, I don't want to text her. I don't want to be vulnerable and tell her where I am. And as soon as I did, the next morning, she sent me a voice memo prayer, and I just felt like the heaviness that I lifted released, and I no longer felt shame about that thing, and I felt like my sister was with me and encouraging me in that thing, and all I had to do was say it.
Yeah. There's a question from the audience that we have, and it says, what does contentment look like in life where it isn't a preferred reality? What does contentment look like in life when we're not in a preferred reality?
That's a good
That's
question.
good.
That's really good.
I would say for me, I think there is a difference between being complacent and being content. For me, contentment is knowing that the season that I'm in is a season. It's not permanent, it's temporary, it's gonna change. And having the perspective of, God, what can I learn in this place that I'm in right now? God, what is the joy that is the joy that I can receive from this season, and finding joy in where I am. At the same time, knowing I won't always be here.
Right. It's a silly one, but I just think of the idea of being on a plane for too long or in a car for too long. I found myself getting to a point where I had to tell myself, just there'll be a point where you're no longer sitting in this car or on this airplane, and you'll be somewhere else. There is going to be a point in time where, you're not going to be in this space. It is a season. Mm-hmm. Just take it for what it is and soak up whatever you can. And honestly, there's another time that was even more challenging than that. I had a lot of shoulder dislocations through high school into college, finally got surgery. But this past year, I went back to therapy to kind of fix some things in my back. But after my first session, I was actually rolling out my back on a foam roller, and I just re-dislocated my shoulder right there, just in my room, and no one was around to help me, so my arm is just out. And I'm laying there, I'm struggling to pop it back in place, and I'm in pain. Recognizing I'm in pain, I'm afraid that I might not be able to get back my shoulder in place. And eventually I pop it in place, And what's funny is it was an exercise that the therapist had told me to be doing.
Yeah.
And I found myself, not getting the results I wanted to. But in that moment, I had this mindset shift of, okay, either I'm going to be kind of mad that this is the reality that I'm currently in, and it's kind of a hiccup along the road of where I want to be with my body, my physical health. But I shifted to, no, actually now I know where my weaknesses are, and now I can assess them better. And I think that helped me be content with knowing that I have something to work on, and I have some goals to set, even within this broader goal now.
Yeah.
So
Christian,
I think something
as he was speaking, just something else came to mind really quick. And because I'm the only lady up here, I'm going to take that liberty and say what I got to say. In a single sentence, as you were speaking, what just came to mind to me, I had a rough transition period moving from California to here. And I think contentment in a sentence is, instead of enduring your season or circumstances, it's simply embracing it.
yeah, amen.
Your turn, Blue?
I think what's important within all this is, as you guys are speaking, right, when it comes to contentment, there's immediate scripture that comes to mind of Philippians 4. And this is Paul speaking, and in verse 11, he says this right here. I think it's really key to highlight that not that I was ever in need, for I have learned how to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live in almost nothing or in everything. I have learned the secret of living in every situation, whether my stomach is full or empty or plentiful, for I can do all things through Christ who gives me the strength. And so right before that, just the word, and I want to move on to the next question, is I have learned to be content. And so I think that that's important for us to recognize. It's more of a spectrum. It's not an either or, I'm not, or you're right, like I am or I'm not. Yeah, it's not like a switch, right? Yeah. So I think that's important to us to highlight. I want to end on this note right here, and then we're going to wrap up, because I think that this is, get to my question. This is a big one that I think is really, really key. There's this idea when it comes to being, walking in our faith and things like that, of discernment, right? And discerning God's will. And somebody put that in one of the questions of, how do I know when it is? How do I know when it's not? Sort of idea. And because we all, no matter what, if we come to a place in our relationship with God, we want to know that this is what God wants for me, right? And so I just want a one sentence, one word that comes to mind when it comes to your own personal walk of asking God, or trying to be in God's will. We're trying to figure out, yes, I want to do what God is saying or calling me to do. What is a one word or sentence that comes to mind for you as you think about, okay, this is how I embrace that. This is how I go about that. Justice?
I'm going to try really hard to make this like a short phrase.
Just bring it all in. Bring it all in. We got to wrap up.
But often, because I find myself doing that a lot, actually, trying to really let go. Because as that person that wants things perfect, control-y, then I need to be like, okay, according to your will be done. I will rest in that.
Yeah.
Is often just kind of saying, like asking myself, like, can I go for the ride? Like, can I just go for the ride? Like, hey, this would be nice. This would be a nice touch-up, but I understand if there are better things, then that just won't happen.
Okay.
Right.
Can I go for a ride?
Hands.
Okay.
Hold with
Christian?
open hands. Yeah, I mean, like that idea for sure, like holding things with open hands.
Okay.
I think too often we hold things with closed hands. We're like,
Yep.
God, I'm going to give this to you.
Yep.
Do what you will,
Yep.
But it's like, it looks more like this. And
Yep.
sometimes he leaves those things. But really, for me, I've learned, like, God's will looks so much different than what our parents' will might be for us.
Ooh.
Like, I want to see you do this. Like, even the successes your parents want
Talk
for you
about it.
are so, they're real and they're important, but God's will is far more his presence.
Okay.
and our
Don't give us too
presence.
much. Don't give us
That's
too
all I'm
much. Cut
saying.
it off. Cut it
It's
off.
all his presence.
Go. Talk to us.
The perfectionist in me is only going to say a sentence. So it's two things for me.
Nice.
God's peace, and also knowing that if I get off track, he's going to redirect me.
All right. I would conclude all of that with also saying that sometimes we get in a place where we're paralyzed. If we don't ever take a risk in thinking that this is probably God's will, we'll always miss God's will. So I just want to leave it at that.